Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Primetime Alive program on building resilience in the face of crisis. I am Vicki Newell, manager of the Primetime Alive program here at Mary Greeley Medical Center. I wish you could all be with us here today in person, but I'm so happy that so many of you were able to join us virtually for this important and timely presentation. You see that I do not have a mask on. We do require everyone in the hospital to wear a mask in public spaces or if you are within 6 feet of each other. And right now we're in Bessie Myers Auditorium, 150-seat auditorium. It's just Dr. Martin and myself. So we will be able to maintain that 6-foot distance from each other. And without our masks on, then hopefully you'll be able to understand us a whole lot better. This is our first Primetime Alive program that we've offered virtually and most likely will not be our last. We've tried to anticipate any problems that we may face, but as you all know, when we're working with technology, anything can happen. So please hang in there with us as if we do have difficulties, we will do whatever possible to correct it as soon as possible. Before we start our program, I want to make sure that everyone is aware of how to ask a question. I'm going to show you, well, Tim, up in the booth, are you able to put up the other slide so I can show everybody how to ask a question? All right, so you will not be able to verbally, even if you have a microphone on your computer, you will not be able to turn it on and ask a question. We have muted that option. What you can do is type in a question, and as you can, probably in the upper right-hand corner of your monitor, you should have a box. I'm using my mouse here to kind of show you where, what it should look like. At the bottom of that box, it says enter a question for the staff. If you type a question in there, Dr. Martin will be able to see he has questions, and those will all be addressed at the end of the presentation. So now on to our program. Our presenter today is Dr. Peter Martin. Dr. Martin is University Professor of Human Development and Family Studies at Iowa State University. He received a PhD in Human Development and Family Studies from the Pennsylvania State University and a Doctor of Philosophy in Psychology from the University of Bonn, Germany. His research is concerned with longevity, personality, stress, coping, and well-being. At Iowa State University, he leads the Exceptional Longevity Initiative. Dr. Martin has published 2 books and more than 190 professional papers. He is a contributing member of a number of professional societies, editorial boards, and professional service organizations. As an international scholar, Dr. Martin has worked in Germany and India, and he was a Fulbright Research Scholar at the University of Osaka, Japan. In 2014, where he compared aspects of longevity in Japan and the United States. Dr. Martin currently serves on the advisory board of the Healthiest Ames Initiative, the board of Heartland Senior Services, and the board of the Iowa chapter of the Fulbright Association. Please welcome Dr. Martin.
Well, thank you, Vicki, and thank you for inviting me to talk about this very, very timely topic. I have been doing research on resilience for about 10 years, but I never imagined that I would have the opportunity to actually talk during some form of a difficult situation or crisis about the topic of resilience. In many ways, I'm going through a crisis myself right now because I'm standing in front of an audience with one person attending here, visibly attending. So we'll see how resilient I am to manage the situation in here. But truth be told, of course, we're going all through very unusual and challenging times. And so the topic of resilience is a very timely one for all of us to think and to consider. So I want to talk about 5 specific issues today with you here today, and I'm looking forward to the questions. So do feel free to submit your questions as I go along, and I will try my best to answer them at the end of my presentation. I will begin my presentation talking about the topic of what is resilience, how do we define it, I will then try to make the point that resilience really is a common experience, that this is nothing extraordinary that people do or use. Lots of people know about these resilience skills. Our own research has demonstrated that there are at least four different ways to talk about resilience, and I will touch on all four of them at least briefly. There's what we call personal resilience. Is there resilience that an individual has, and can we develop this personal resilience? And part of that personal resilience is the second area of what we call cognitive resilience. The third area is not so much on the personal, but on the interpersonal level, which we refer to as social resilience, and often related also economic resilience. And then what we see more and more in this particular challenging situation and crisis with the coronavirus is the issue of community resilience. So fairly recently, people have focused on the question of what can communities do, not just individuals, to react to challenging situations. My fourth area then is more applied, and I will actually share with you what are the characteristics of resilient people. You can find out, if you wish, whether you or what your degree of resilience is, and what you perhaps could do to improve it if you wanted to. And the last point, of course, related to this is the question of how do we build our own resilience. And I will give some very specific tips and strategies that have been proven in the past when people face challenging situations. So starting with the definition, I want to start with a quote by Nelson Mandela, which is often used when we talk about resilience. He wrote, "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." And that is really a good guideline for resilience and for my talk today. Really, when we talk about resilience, is not that you can avoid stressful situations, because most of us will experience difficult times personally, in the community, or now in our country, all over the world, for that matter. And so it's not avoiding these kinds of situations. But if you do fall down, how do you get back up? And what ways do you have to get back to the old situation, or create a new situation that helps you move on? So I think this is a useful way to start out our discussion on resilience. If you look at a dictionary definition of resilience, Merriam-Webster is what we often use as our reference. Resilience there is defined as an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune and change. And this is not altogether different from what Nelson Mandela had said or written. You want to find the most optimal ways to recover, to bounce back, as he said, to difficult times, misfortune, or changing situations. Anne Maston is one of the leading psychologists in the area of resilience research, and she defined in a landmark article for the scientific community resilience as good outcomes in spite of serious threats to adaptation or development. So again, there are some similar threads, whether you take a dictionary definition, whether you look at quotes, or whether you look at scientific definitions of resilience. In the end, we want a good or acceptable outcome when you are threatened with serious situations, either personal or in the community or society, and you want to have ways in which you can adapt optimally to those situations. So that is basically what people have in common. Now, obviously, the current situation prompts me to try to make specific references from time to time to the coronavirus. I could not obviously avoid this particular topic. We all have probably seen what first looked like sort of a weird but beautiful in some ways pictures, but it's not so beautiful in its effect. This is the coronavirus that we are talking about. We all have, and you've heard Vicky talk about the importance of wearing masks. I have mine right here next to me. And of course, we get daily updates on the areas in the world that are affected by it. You see a major emphasis here in Asia, where we have many, many cases. You see Europe being affected. And then, of course, here in the United States, we've seen a major outbreak. It looks a little lighter here in South America, This is, I think, as of yesterday, and in Africa. But most of us think that they are just lagging in time. And just like we were behind Europe a little bit, we'll see the effect of the coronavirus or COVID-19 in these areas of the world too. And they'll probably need help from the rest of the world to survive this, just as the Ebola virus needed the help from the rest of the world too. On May 11th, I'm sure some of you follow the news. Story County surpassed 60 cases of the COVID-19. 21 cases reported just in the last week. And so we are seeing a smaller number of cases, which is good. And I think it's because many of us do use or apply these suggestions that have been made by others to stay home. I've not been to my office in 6 weeks, even though we had classes at Iowa State to teach. We have meetings. I can tell you, I've probably the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've had Zoom meetings, professional Zoom meetings, 6 hours a day, just for my home office. And so we continue to work, but we do stay away from the office. My wife and I only go out if we go shopping, and then we go during a time when few other people appear to be there. And this all contributes to the relatively lower number of cases. And again, we'll talk about this in a little bit in more specifics. Now, the coronavirus is obviously terrible. We all want it to go away. We didn't expect it to be quite like that, and who knows which direction it will go in the future. It's very hard to predict the future development of this particular virus. But in terms of crisis and challenges and difficult situations, we have been there before as a society and as a world. And some of you may know this picture from the Vietnam War that I always try to show about children who were affected in war zones. And the reason why I'm showing this, there's a number of reasons, obviously, as you'll see in a minute. But the primary first reason is to show you that the whole research on resilience really started with children. It was not a research area for adults or for older adults, my specific research area, but really the question of how do children who experience war times, whether it's the Vietnam War or World War II or World War I, or now, of course, more recent conflicts in Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and how are children affected by this? So this is a picture where you can see that South Vietnamese forces follow after terrified children in here, including the 9-year-old Kim Phac. In here, you see her right in the middle of the picture in the center. This is after an aerial napalm attack on suspected Viet Cong hiding places in 1972. And the South Vietnamese plane accidentally dropped flaming napalm on South Vietnamese troops and civilians. And here's this terrified girl that had ripped off her burning clothes while fleeing. Well, the other reason why I'm showing this picture is because we know what happened to this particular girl. And here's a picture, a more recent picture of her as an adult. And you can see she's smiling. She actually is featured in a book with the name The Girl in the Picture, as you can see in here. And she said that napalm is very, very powerful, but her way to deal with it and to overcome it, as she is featured in the book, is by having faith, forgiveness, and love that she considers to be much more powerful than any attack. And she says we wouldn't have war at all if everyone could learn how to live with truth, love, hope, and forgiveness. And if that little girl in that picture can do it, ask yourself, as is mentioned in the book, can you, with love and peace? So this is a direct quote out of this particular book, and you can see that even being exposed by one of the most terrible events you can imagine, she survived, and she went on, and she continued on very, very well. Well, here's another example that I'm sure all of you know from the history books. We have here Holocaust survivors being in Nazi concentration camps is probably one of the most terrible things you can imagine. And of course, a few people were lucky and survived these concentration camps. And this is a picture taken in one of the concentration camps of these survivors. And you think, wow, look at them. And what effect would this experience, this terrible, terrible experience have on these survivors? And could they go on? And how long could they go on? And we have not followed up these people in particular, but obviously they are, unfortunately, there were many Holocaust sites and many Nazi concentration camps. And again, a famous group that I always like to feature is what's been called the Buchenwald boys. So Buchenwald, also one of the Nazi concentration camps. And here they are in later adulthood. They were able to reestablish, all of them, not only to survive and to keep going, but to be quite successful in business. They all established families with strong Jewish identities, and they went on. Doesn't mean that you forget ever what has happened to you. It doesn't mean that this doesn't leave a mark on you, but it certainly does mean that resilient people can continue to go on, and we have, even in these very, very extreme circumstances, examples where this is happening reasonably well for people. They seem quite optimistic here in later life. And then, of course, some of you probably remember the Great Depression, or if not, if you've not lived through it, then again, you might know it from the history books or from your parents or grandparents. The children of the Great Depression or anybody going through the Great Depression had a very, very hard time indeed. And we talk in many ways today again about the economic crisis that may be occurring after the coronavirus will be ceasing to have an impact. Maybe a long time after that, we will still learn the effect of the long-term effect of this economic crisis. And so this is a photograph taken in 1937 showing hungry children, and it captures the poverty of the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression in the 1930s. And of course, things got better over time, but it did take some time indeed. Here's again one of the survivors who reflected on these very difficult times. And again, we still have some of these historical accounts. If we talk to the older generation who went through it either as a child or as an adolescent or even a young adult. And here's Rose Panzarella. She's 86, and she speaks about her experience during the Great Depression during an interview that she took in here. And again, she didn't say everything was easy, but she did indicate in that interview how you can come to grips with even very difficult events, overcome them, and again, build resilience that may help you as a survivor in here. Well, more recently, as we talk about COVID-19 or the coronavirus, we do see some amazing stories of individuals who also not only had to hide from the virus, as we're all trying to do, but contracted, unfortunately, the virus, but survived it. And some of you know that my research is on longevity, as Vicky indicated early on, and particularly on centenarians. And here we have a New York City centenarian who survived the coronavirus in time to celebrate her 107th birthday. And that is amazing. You might have seen the news accounts of this if you follow the news. Her name was Frances Abatiamento, and she not only survived COVID-19, she had as a child survived the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, when tens of millions died worldwide, and we often compare this current virus to the Spanish flu pandemic. She survived in New York Hurricane Sandy in 2012, and even a broken hip and shoulder at age 101, and survived all of that. And again, it probably takes a good amount of resilience to come to terms with that. And again, we'll use her example and other examples later on to indicate how you build resilience and what you can do to face such challenging events. And her quote here that I chose was, everyone needs to be grateful and count their blessings every day. So gratefulness is something that actually researchers in gerontology have focused on very recently to say, well, the feeling or the sense of gratefulness may indeed be important to adjust successfully to older age and to longevity and health in later life. And then one last example from people who have not only survived but have dealt with difficult situations, in this case also COVID-19, is Captain Tom Moore. Again, you might have heard about him. He was in the news and really not only survived himself, but he decided to do something. As a 99-year-old British war veteran, he decided he was going to complete at least 100 laps of his garden, aided by a walker, as you see in this particular picture. And he was doing that to raise money online. And I think he wanted to, his goal was to raise maybe 10,000 pounds, which would be maybe something like $20,000. And that was a lofty goal for somebody who had never done anything like this. But as so many other video clips that we now see on YouTube and elsewhere, he raised more than $39 million, and this is in dollars, $39 million so far. And the campaign is still ongoing. I just checked the last couple of days. I think this is the last number I could find. Because he was proactive. He said, I'm not just going to sit here and let these things happen. Maybe I can help a little bit. Maybe I can do something here in the United Kingdom to help other people who have health problems. And we'll revisit him again at the end of my presentation. Now, all of these people have done very well to deal with war situations, with economic crisis, with the virus, or with the flu epidemic. That is not to say that everybody's doing well. I want to make this very clear. There are also people who carry these traumatic events with them for a very, very long time, certainly known as post-traumatic stress syndrome. So while I can give you these positive examples, and we hope that most of us would have the opportunity to come through any of these crises, personal or historical, we also need to make sure that not everybody is able to do that, maybe because of circumstances, maybe because of very personal experiences that they cannot overcome very easily. And so while it's easy for me to stand here and say, let's all be resilient, this is easier said than done. So I can only give some hints from our research and from our evidence that perhaps can help some people overcome this. But we also need to make sure that that some people need additional professional help to overcome this. So often the issue of these kinds of epidemics or crises are discussed in the scientific literature under the terms of stress and stressful life events. And there's a whole series of life events that obviously can cause stress and can challenge your level of resilience. There are family and relationship problems that some of us face every day, perhaps, or on a regular basis. There are obviously serious health problems that people deal with from time to time. We also often have difficulties in our workplace or during the transition or in retirement. There are certainly a lot of financial stressors that people deal with, residential changes that people make as they move from one place to another. There are also something that we call daily stresses that we deal with. And then there are a lot of chronic stresses. No how hard we try, they don't very easily go away. So all of these challenges call for us to develop and to use our resources to try to be as resilient as possible as we can. Of course, today we are primarily focusing on historical events such as the coronavirus to see how we may be able to deal with that. But again, what I'm talking about here today in terms of resilience would probably apply to any kind of stress that we are dealing with. So back to Anne Maston, the psychologist who had this definition I shared with you early on in the presentation, talking about resilience. She is a psychologist at the University of Minnesota, and she has really convinced many of us that indeed resilience is not unusual or uncommon experience. Far from the truth. In interviewing many people, as she has done and as we have done, resilience is quite a common experience. It is ordinary, it is not extraordinary, is the term that she actually uses. People commonly demonstrate resilience in your family, in your community. And again, doesn't mean we can always, in all situations, be resilient, but we can certainly try to do our best. And certainly one recent historical example that I've not much talked about, but that many of us still remember very well, is the the response that Americans had to the 9/11 terrorist attack, and how individuals in New York City and elsewhere rebuilt their lives afterwards. So this is not something that people were just fortunate to do. They knew how to be resilient. And as a matter of fact, here in Iowa, we have a lot of our own challenges, whether it is a tornado that may hit in Marshalltown most recently or elsewhere, whether it is the floods that hit us in western Iowa. And when you see these news accounts, listen in sometimes. What a mayor or a governor would typically say, this is terrible here. Look at the floods, look at the devastation of a tornado, but we are resilient people. This is a resilient state. This is a resilient city, a resilient community. So all of this really suggests that resilient is a common experience, and not to say that these are not difficult situations and you don't have difficult situations to overcome, but the resilience may help you to do so. There are many, many books on resilience that you could find in the literature. You just have to Google it, and you will find, I think I saw a top 100 list of 100 books of resilience as I updated my presentation in here. So there are at least 100 books out there, recent books on resilience. I'm just listing a few of them here to basically make my point that really this is Ann Maston again, the author that I've cited a couple of times from Minnesota. And she actually talks about a type R, transformative resilience for thriving in a turbulent world. And I recommend it's a very easy book to read if you want to follow up more on this. And then there's also a line of research on family resilience, as you can see in here. Froma Walsh is leading the issue of asking how can we build resilience within families. And then there's a lifespan book on here. There's resilience in aging, focusing on older adults. There's community resilience. And then my favorite, a book on resilient aging. I'm biased because we have contributed to that book. So that's why I like this particular one. But they're all good books, and there are many more studies on it. What I want to focus on in the remaining part of my presentation really is something that the American Psychological Association has developed with a group of psychologists over time. And this is an update from when I last talked about resilience a few years ago. So again, this still is evolving as a topic, trying to learn what are the factors that are important in resilience. And again, I am a psychologist by training, so I'm not so much talking about the physical aspects, which might be important too, or the sociological aspects of resilience, but really more the individual aspects of what can any individual do or focus on in order to build resilience, or as the American Psychological Association calls it, the road to resilience. And there are really 5 particular factors that they are focusing on, or that we are focusing on when we talk about resilience. And the first one really is something that cannot be overstated. The primary factor in resilience is having caring and supportive relationships within and outside the family. Really, if you look at the literature and some of the research that we know about resilience, people who are resilient have a way to maintain close relationships. And this is challenging now because this is exactly the point here at this particular situation with the coronavirus, where we are not allowed to have the same type of close connection to other people. I haven't seen my adult children in 6, 7, 8 weeks, and yes, I do see them on Zoom. We have family meetings every weekend, but we all know it's not quite the same. But that doesn't mean that we should not try. It does not mean that we should hide in our houses and pretend like we don't have any relationships to the people around us, to our families, and so that is a very, very important aspect to consider. Relationships that create love and trust, provide role models, and offer encouragement and reassurance, they help bolster a person's resilience. And so this is true for us. We are models to other people around us, but we're also certainly watching others. And I'm not going to talk about politicians in here, but you could ask about anybody you see, whether it's a movie star, a politician, a community leader, a family member. Are they good role models that that create love and trust, that provide a role model and offer encouragement rather than to be negative about the situation. Yes, things are bad, but it doesn't mean we have to contribute to the negativism. And that's what all of this is all about. This first and most important factor is to work even harder on relationships. And isn't it the truth that often we take our relationships for granted? I'm fortunate to be with my wife at home, and how often do we actively try to emphasize that we will weather the storm together? We do, but often we take that relationship for granted too, whether it's a married relationship, the relationship to your children or to your aging parents, whether it is in your workplace to your supervisor or to your co-workers. It is very, very important. I'm very pleased in the many meetings that I have that very often we start out just by asking whether everybody's okay. This seems to be sort of the norm now. You start a Zoom meeting, and whether it's family or whether it is in your community or in the workplace. My work with university groups, we first have a go around and say, Jim, tell me, how are you? Mary, how's it going for you? And that's exactly what this is. It's the resilience about caring about other people, not just to say how terrible things are for you or for society. Well, there are some other points too that are important. The capacity to make realistic plans and take steps to carry them out. It's one thing to bemoan the situation, and yes, it is difficult, but do we have a plan? Do we know when we go shopping to reduce our risk? If you are 60, 65 years and older, do you take advantage of the first hour of going shopping rather than to go on Saturday afternoon? We made that mistake once in the last 6 weeks. We went, I think, on a Saturday morning, and it was terrible, a terrible experience. Never again during this crisis will we go on a Saturday morning. And so, making a plan and carrying it out really helps. A positive view of yourself and the confidence in your strengths and abilities. And we really know that that makes a big difference. We talk about self-esteem. We talk about self-efficacy, believing in yourself, that still, even under the most difficult situations, you are the one who is in the driver's seat. And that is that all the examples I showed to you early on, from Captain Moore to the people who went through the depression of the Holocaust, they all believed that they had strength enough to survive this. So this is very, very important. Skills in communication and problem solving, obviously. Communication, a key to not say the wrong things to make things worse to another person, but to have a productive communication and solve problems where they need to be solved. And then certainly the capacity to manage strong feelings and impulses. During times like this, emotions will run high. I've told all my students, my research assistants, our research, of course, continues on. I said, the longer this lasts, the more difficult it will be, and particularly with regard to emotions and emotional feelings. And so we need to find ways to regulate these emotions, to keep them in track. We can vent, but then we have to go back and say, look, I just needed to vent, and then go back to more productive situations. Actually, you may be surprised to hear that older adults have some advantage in resilience. We do know from research that they tend to use more active strategies. They avoid negative situations more, they don't get themselves into bad situations to begin with. They often use good cognitive strategies to manage these negative emotions, relying on God, relying on another day that will be better. They stay focused on the positive things that they can do rather than focusing on the negative things. They actively compare their current stresses to things they have experienced and coped with successfully in the past. This is a time when experience comes at an advantage for those of us who have experienced similar things. Again, we may have gone through difficult situations in our personal life. We have lost lots of our loved ones, our parents, grandparents, perhaps before that we noticed. We may have changed jobs. Maybe there was a divorce in your family. And so you have had those personal experiences. And so that comes in as an advantage in older adulthood. I see a lot of young adults who are frankly a little bit lost in not knowing how to deal with this. And I wouldn't blame them, because they've not experienced, they've had for the most part, not obviously everybody, but many young adults had a good childhood, good adolescence, had very supportive parents, and now this. And so how do you deal with this? Very, very difficult. Older adults maximize good emotional experiences by selecting activities with familiar positive impact. Laura Carstensen is one of the leading researchers who had emphasized the importance of what she calls socio-emotional selectivity. It's a big word, but what it really means is that as people get older, they become more selective with whom they associate, and they choose people in their networks who give them emotional gratification. I don't want to be around negative people, is what a lot of centenarians tell me, or older adults in general. And young adults, they are not so selective. I always know this when my kids were younger, and Facebook kind of came up, and I looked over their shoulder, and they looked over my shoulder, and all of a sudden they saw, you only have 20 friends in your Facebook network? That was terrible for them. Well, I don't want to have everybody in my Facebook network. And they would have 200, 300 people easily. And so you can see that makes a difference. Old adults have a lifetime of knowledge. Again, that's the experience, and they know what is most important to them. So, sometimes we do have advantages as we get older, and we should truly take advantage of it. Now, again, I talked about these 5 aspects of resilience: personal resilience, cognitive, economic, social, family, and community resilience. And let me just very briefly talk about each one of those. First, about personal resilience. I don't want to basically show this. I don't show you too many data. We're always scientists, data-driven. But I want you to look at this profile. You see, this is the 0 points, or the mid-mark. And here, this score is very, very low. And then this is sort of medium, and then these are very, very high scores. And this is a study of our centenarians that you see. And there's a common pattern in here among many centenarians: low, medium, and very, very high. And the common pattern we found about our resilient centenarians, who have seen a lot, experienced a lot, and still deal with challenging times, is they have low levels of neuroticism or anxiety. Centenarians don't tend to worry a whole lot. Now, they have small levels. A little bit of worry, a little bit of anxiousness is good. That's a protective mechanism. But by and large, their scores on worrying and on anxiousness are very, very low. They are more extroverted, outgoing than introverted, sort of midpoint for being open to new ideas. But there are high levels of conscientiousness and agreeableness, here measured by 2 subscales of what we call competence and trust. Very, very high scores on feeling still competent. Even if you're 100, you still feel competent to deal with difficult situations. And you do have a good sense of trust, trusting your family, trusting your doctor, trusting your leaders in the community to do the right thing. And this is what we see as a resilient, what we've called a robust personality or resilient personality profile. And you see 2 bars here because we asked centenarians to rate themselves. That's the blue line in here, bar. And then the purple one is the scale of their proxy family members who talk about the centenarians. And even though the centenarians are always a little high on these scores, except for trust, the proxies rate them in the very same profile. So again, it's not just a self-report, it's also a report by family members. And by the way, we have replicated this personality profile of resilience, not only for centenarians in the United States, but in my study in Japan that Vicky talked about early on. And we've more recently also looked at something that we call health personality. What is your personality with regard to health issues? And we see the same resilience profile there as well. So very, very important. Cognitive resilience is the next part of it, and basically the point I wanted to make here is that cognitive engagement is important and very effective. You have to keep your mind going, particularly during difficult times. We know that even when we talk about dementia, keeping your mind active is a way to avoid earlier onsets of dementia, but also cognitive coping. We now talk a lot about mindfulness or mindful journaling, reading a lot, doing yoga, doing prayer. All of these are really challenging, not only your body, but certainly your mind, and that's very, very important. And what it does is it increases your what we call cognitive reserve. And as you build up your cognitive reserve, just like you try to build up your savings account with reserves, financial reserves, you have these reserves when you need them during difficult times. So that's why this is very, very important to consider. There's a lot more research, new research on family and social resilience. Really, we've already talked about the importance of relationships, so I'm just not going to talk a whole lot about it. Affect, contact, help is very, very important. Families who are resilient have a sort of a common belief system. They're coherent families, even a spiritual commonality within families. We know that resilient families are flexible, they have social economic resources, and they are very good at communication. They're open about their emotional expression. They say what they're feeling. They're not accusing each other. You never do this. They say, well, you know, I feel a little lost right now. I'm having a bad day. And then you can certainly deal with that in a much better way. And we already talked about socio-emotional selectivity as an important aspect. A lot of research has indicated about community resilience. I'm going to read all of this just to say that neighborhoods can promote resilience to cope with external stresses, so they're very, very important too. So help each other in the community. We are saying, you know, if you haven't heard from your neighbors, call them. Right now, as we're all leaving our homes to be in our backyards, talk to them in safe distance. Most community resilience programs target the adaptive capacities of the community by developing economic, social resources. So that's very, very important. And certainly, there are now some intervention studies that do say that when communities provide informational, emotional support using social channels, they deal with stresses much, much better. I guess that's why I'm here. Community, what is it? Using social channels to provide information. So yeah, I can't see you, but I know you're there, and I enjoy knowing there's somebody with me, and hopefully you enjoy that other people are with you here as well. So in the last couple of minutes, let me see whether you are resilient. Remember, it's not a trait that people have or not have. It involves specific behaviors, thoughts, actions that can be learned and developed in just about anyone. So here is probably the most often used resilience scale. Psychologists have developed these scales to measure resilience. And so you can go through each one of these items, 12 questions, and you can ask yourself, is this me? I mean, obviously, we're not doing a detailed diagnostic test in here, but the more of these items you can endorse, the more resilient you happen to be at this time. So if you say, I'm able to adapt to change easily, I feel in control of my life, I tend to bounce back. We already talked about that. I have close, dependable relationships. You can see this is built on the research that I've already talked about. I remain optimistic. I don't give up. I can think clearly and logically. That's the cognitive component. I see humor in situations, even under stress. I'm self-confident. I feel strong as a person. I believe things happen for a reason. I can handle uncertainty. I know where to turn for help. And I like challenges and feel comfortable taking the lead. So, you know, if you have 12 points, you obviously, you can sign off right now. You don't need me anymore. If you have 0 points, what I would like, or anything in between, you can work on these. So maybe this is not something, again, that you either have or not, but maybe you could convince yourself to take more in charge and more control in your life. Build those close relationships. Call somebody you haven't called for a while, and they'll be happy and you'll be happier after that. You know, I don't know about the humor. I'm not particularly good at that, so I'm not perfect on resilience, so maybe that's something I can work on. Handling uncertainty. So these are all things that you can certainly work on. So the 5 resilient factors from the Connor and Davidson study is personal competence, you saw that early on, trust in one's instincts, accepting change, control, and then spiritual influences, and let them allow them in your own heart, as it were. And so finally, building your own resilience. This is again from the American Psychological Association, The Road to Resilience. And again, you could read up on that in more detail, but these are the main points in here. Building your connections. Again, I'm repeating myself now, but I want it to stick. And so I guess that's why it's important. Prioritize relationships, join a group. And again, you can't now go out there and join a lot of groups, but I have seen my wife and others engage in their book clubs, which they have in person, online, and I guess they have more often meetings now with their book clubs than they had before, just to interact, just to have somebody else to talk with. And we haven't talked much about fostering wellness, but I do want to emphasize this. I've talked a lot about cognitive resilience, but we need to take care of our body. I've mentioned to my staff, to my students, and to my family that the best thing is really to develop a routine in which you can exercise regularly. If you can't go out, we have promoted through Healthiest Ames a home-based exercise program. And when my wife says, well, today's not the day to go out, it's raining, we will do the 13 exercises from the Go to Life program that's been developed by NIH. So you can exercise at home. You can walk at home, and so exercising is important. Practicing mindfulness, avoiding negative outlines, But wellness also includes getting your sleep, going to bed. I have one student who stayed up until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, always irregularly, got headaches, had no motivation to continue. And I suggested to them, go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, build a regular schedule for yourself. Certainly finding a purpose, still helping others. Tom Moore was a good example of that. Being proactive, moving towards your own goals, and looking for opportunities for self-discovery. Reading books, good time now to read books that help you do that. Embracing healthy thoughts, keeping things in perspective. We've talked about acceptance change. Centenarians are very, very good at that. They will tell you more often than anybody else I've talked to, I will accept what I can't change. And so that is, I think, a good starting point. Maintaining a hopeful outlook, learning from your past, and that's the experience that I talked about earlier on. And then truly, sometimes we just need additional help, and we cannot do it ourselves. And if you are if you fall in that category, or you know somebody in your family who really is not being able to draw on those reserves that I talked about, suggest that they get help. There are a lot of helplines, in the community. At the university, we have a helpline. So getting help when you need it is crucial if you want to build your own resilience. So I've talked about resilience is the ability to recover from adversity. That is the official definition. It's an ordinary, not an extraordinary perspective or trait that you have, and everybody can improve on resilience. And I would challenge all of you to build on what you already have, to build your reserves. And that is on the personal level, on the cognitive level, on the personal and social level, and where you can or where you're involved to also help with community resilience. Resilience involves support, good coping, positive attitudes, good communication, and the management of particularly negative emotions, as it were. So I want to finish up with, again, Captain Tom in here, who, as you noticed, raised, at that point, it was 20 million pounds for the British healthcare system. And not only did he walk 100 laps, he also was involved in a song that really went viral over the net, and certainly in Britain and elsewhere. And this is the text of this: when you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet silver song at the lark. And you've not heard him sing. It's a long song together with a famous singer in the UK. I want to play at least a little bit so you can get a feel for it. And then, of course, here's the YouTube link that you could use later on. So let's have him entice us with this particular song.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high. And don't forget.
We do have some technical problems here. That's not exactly how it goes, so I'm not sure whether we can get back. Yes. It goes on, and again, I invite you to go on this road of resilience. And if you need an uplift, at least for me, I will listen to Tom Moore and the choir behind it. But before we open it up for questions, I think Ricky wants to say something.
Yes, real quick. If you want to ask questions, I know I showed you at the beginning where to type in your question. I believe some of you may not see that little section where to type that in. You may need to expand that screen. You should have something similar. Whoops, like I'm pointing to this red arrow up here. If you can see that, you should have a similar arrow. If you click on that, it should expand out and open, and then you should see that box to ask a question at the bottom, and then you can hit send to send that to us. But we do have some questions, so we'll get to those right now.
Okay, now I have to find the questions. Let's see, that's oh, not.
Questions.
Yeah, do you see them?
Way at the bottom, I think. Can you?
Oh, okay, so
expand?
oh here we go. Now I see it.
Okay.
Let me. I think we have two people working on it at the same time. So
Yeah.
I'll let our tech person.
Can you click on the questions?
Let me close this first. I wanted to. Oh, no, I don't want to.
No,
I guess I don't want to close that. So
Can
yeah.
you click on?
There we go.
There we go.
Okay. So based on Masters' definition of resilience, are the characteristics of a good outcome universal or unique to the individual experiences, the threats that one experiences? There are individual differences, and maybe I didn't make this point clear enough, and I should have. I didn't try to suggest that everybody deals with challenging situations in the same way, and the outcome will not always be exactly the same. But just like any other resilience that we might be talking about, you can maybe draw on this checking account or another savings account to draw money, and so the same is true here too. Some people will be able to capitalize more on their relationships. But truth be told, not everybody has strong relationships. Let's presume that you didn't get married, you didn't have children, you live alone at home, and you're quite lonely. Who are you going to call on? Yes, there are people in the community who could help, but maybe there are other aspects of resilience that can help you. Maybe you get strength from prayer, from church, from spirituality. And so certainly then the outcomes would also not necessarily be universal. Again, not everybody is going to be fine. But the question is, can you go on? Can you make this part of your biography and your experience? And if you do, then you're managing it quite well. So yes, there are individual differences in the way you react to challenging times, and there are also different individual outcomes. But if you look at everybody as a whole, basically I showed you a menu of topics that might be working on that quite well. Okay, let's go to, let's see.
That's what are the risks for individuals?
Yeah, we have some questions above that and questions below, but I'm going to go just down here for now. So the question here is, what are the risks for individuals who may be chronically lacking in one or more of the factors in resilience? Well, we often talk about compensation. So just as I tried to answer the previous question, if you lack in that one area, as I said, maybe you don't have a lot of family members that are alive for you, then you need to work harder on the other aspects. And for some people, that means they take care of more of their body. They try to stay in shape. I know a person who had lost his wife and is pretty much alone here in the community, but he exercises, walks, or even ran for many years every day because he wanted physically to stay in shape. You may, for some people, it may mean drawing on their spiritual or religious resources or mindfulness. But that yoga may not be something for person A, but it may be something for person B. So again, it is optimizing the resources that you have, not bemoaning the ones that you don't have. So that's perhaps the most important message in here. But you can certainly try to work on that as best as you can. Thank you. Well, I thank you for thanking me. Thank you for sharing such much needed information. I can relate to much of what you said. Well, thank you for saying that. I think that's very encouraging to know. Okay, the rest was, I think, just before that. So these are the 4 questions that I have. Or I guess it was just 2 primary questions that we had in here. So unless there's another question coming in, I want to emphasize again, resilience is perhaps the most important resource we have in challenging times. Yes, economic resources are important too. We talk about them as economic resilience too. But really, the one component of resilience that you can trust is yourself and your relationships. And so if I want to re-emphasize one aspect of resilience, then it is to build on what you have and use those resources during times. I see this in a lot of older adults who don't want to be a burden to their children, obviously, and who don't want to use any help that's being offered, whether it's by the community. Heartland Senior Services, as I'm a member on the board there, is continuing to deliver Meals on Wheels. And isn't this more important than ever for people who don't have access to meals? And the last numbers that I've seen have increased the number of people in the community who have taken advantage of that. So that's a community resource, is to get meal support, to get home health services. If people can't come, I know, you can't easily go to the dentist, you can't go easily to the doctor, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't call in if there is a problem that needs attention. And so resilience is something that is under your control, and it's up to you to say to your daughter or to your son or to a community service provider, can you help me with this? I don't know what to do. And that is not a sign of weakness. That is a sign of resilience. And that's perhaps the best message I can give you here. So do we have anything else? I think that's all we have, Vicky.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. Like we've talked, what a great timely presentation. Like I said, this is our first program that we have done virtually, and so we have a lot to learn from it. So any of you out there, if you have ideas or suggestions on things that we can do to make it a better experience for you, and I see a couple other comments coming in, but let's see. Oh, okay. There is another question here. It says, can you tell any more about people you interviewed in blue zones - Centenarians? How?
I can, but that's another talk. And I guess that's the talk we actually had planned for me to come to Primetime Alive. Well, we learned a lot about the blue zones, and I guess we haven't directly related it to resilience, but you certainly could. If you look at the primary commonalities that you find in blue zones, and if you look at the people, they are resilient. I already talked about the personality resilience profile. We find that in the blue zones among centenarians as well. I mean, that's been my research. Certainly reasonable eating patterns are very important, and we find them in blue zones. Not so much whether you eat only fish all your life or whether you have only eat vegetables and fruit. Really, what turns out to be more important is to be moderate in what you eat and not to overeat. And that's what I think here many of us in Iowa, sometimes me included, do not do very well. Is we just eat more than we should. So the blue zone in Japan has a saying, "Hari hachibu me," which is only eat until you're about 80% full. Well, I'd be happy if I could convince myself to eat when I'm 100% full, and so we all can still work on it. So good eating behaviors, the exercise that I talked about. Natural exercise is something that we see definitely in all blue zones. People are walking all the time. They don't jump into a car in their garage, go through a drive-through and come back home. They do walk and walk a lot. So that's very important. Certainly, and we do very well here in Ames and in Iowa and in the United States, better than we have, is the smoking rates. A lot of people forget to talk about it, but the number one component of not surviving well and a lot of chronic diseases is to smoke. And so if you're still among some of those, I know it's difficult to stop, but the blue zone centenarians, very, very small percentage who has ever smoked. Very moderate alcohol intake too. So it's those eating behaviors, exercise, a lot of things that we really know about, the personality traits, the robust personality that is related to not only longevity, but what we call healthy longevity. But more on that maybe another time.
Wonderful. Yes, we did have a program scheduled for June with Dr. Martin, so we'll have to kind of see how we're able to proceed with that. But he does such a great job. He is not off the hook. We will have him back again another time. But again, I was just kind of finishing up saying, if you have suggestions on how we can improve, please let us know. Please also now know that we are recording this presentation. And so I will get information out to our Primetime Alive members, and we'll probably have out on social media as well, how to view that recording, where it will be located, and you can share it with other people as well. So great presentation. I know I will be sharing it with some people. I wanted to say the Meals on Wheels program, talk about resilience and people find ways to adapt. So yes, we do have more people. It's a program between Mary Greeley and Heartland that does Meals on Wheels. So not only do we have more people taking the meals, which is a great resource for them, we needed additional volunteers to deliver these meals, partially because we had an increase of need, but also because we did have some people that said, I fall into a high-risk group, my family doesn't want me out delivering. When we put the word out, we had 20 people quickly come in and say, hey, I would be happy to deliver a meal. So I think that's their way of being resilient during this time, reaching out and being able to help other people. So it's really a win-win situation for everyone. So once again, thank you, Dr. Martin. Totally appreciate you taking your time and coming here today for us. And stay healthy out there, everyone. And please let me know other ideas you have for programs or suggestions that you might have. A couple of things came in. What's the website for at-home exercise?
Well, you can directly write to me and pxmartin@iastate.edu, and I'll respond. You can also just search for Go for Life, Go, G-O, and then a 4 like in the number, and then life like in life, Go for Life, all one word. And the NIH site will come up with a pamphlet that we've used for these home-based exercises. But again, if you write directly to me, my email address is on the first slide in the slide deck. I will send you all that information as a PDF attachment. So glad to hear you're interested.
And that ends our program. Thank you for joining us, everyone.